It's India's moment on the big global stage, India's presidency in G20. We're talking about the G20 Foreign Ministers visit, but very crucial bilaterals also taking place. And let's talk about the India-China bilateral that's currently underway. And this is the first India-China talks at the level of the foreign ministers here since the LAC standoff. All important India-China bilateral at the level of the foreign ministers currently underway. This is a meeting between External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and Gangchen. The meeting that's currently underway, Dr. Jaishankar is meeting his Chinese counterpart. Will this lead to dialing down of tensions along the line of actual control and a restoration of April-May 2020 scenario? I quickly want to cut across to India Today's Foreign Affairs editor Geeta Mohan joining us for more on the story. So Geeta, this is a very crucial bilateral of the foreign ministers on the sidelines of the G20. Do we realistically expect dialing down of tensions along the LAC?
Well, the fact that he is a new foreign minister who's come after President Xi Jinping took over for the third time is messaging in itself. These are meetings, Gaurav, that China is not going to miss. But having a bilateral on the sideline is significant, and not just one. We are being told that there could be a second one with Ajit Doval, since he's tipped to be a state councillor soon, and will become the special representative on border talks as well. So this could very well set the tone and tenor for how India-China relations are going to look in coming months, just ahead of a presidential visit by President Xi Jinping, either for the SCO summit or for the G20 summit. India is going to be very firm on what it wants. Dr. Jaishankar has been very, very clear about that there is no other option. It cannot be business as usual unless China pushes back and withdraws from areas that were traditionally held by the Indian side. Having said that, there is also realization that at this point in time, there are no alternatives to China when it comes to supply chains, and therefore we've seen a growth in trade between the two sides. There are other concerns that could be raised with regards to visas, with regards to students who want to return to China and join the universities that they're studying in. So there are a lot of areas of concern, but this certainly is an important visit, also a very big one at that, when the bilateral talks are taking place. The first high-level engagement since March 2022, when Wang Yi as foreign minister visited India. And again, there have been a lot of problems. The Chinese side come from a position of strength, not because they're strong, but because Xi Jinping has got a third term. So Qin Gang has come with a mandate, and we'll have to wait and see what that mandate really is. What's the messaging?
The fact that there is a conversation that is taking place between the two foreign ministers, the fact that the new foreign minister could well, we're told, would also be the state councillor and the special representative on border talks. So, and a dialogue with the National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. What's extremely interesting, Geeta, what would be extremely interesting to see India insisting it cannot be business as usual or relationship as usual until China pulls back and restores the April-May 2020 situation. So is there a middle ground on that? What's the road ahead? What's the way forward on this?
Well, Gaurav, to be very, very clear, there is no middle ground when it comes to the eastern Ladakh sector, where we still have Chinese forces sitting in areas that make India uncomfortable because they were traditionally held by the Indian side, and there is no middle ground on that. The Chinese will have to go back. Status quo ante is what the Indian side prefer, and they've been very firm about that. So the messaging is not diluted. There is no other message but this one when it comes to the border. But yes, there are going to be conversations on how it needs to be done. We know that the Chinese president himself has had a huge political turmoil within the country, a lot of questions being asked about his own presidency, and at such a time, and the Chinese are focusing not just at the border between India and China, but also Taiwan and the South China Sea. So with all the areas that they're focusing on, for them right now, priority would be Taiwan, but they are certainly not going to let go of the territories very easily when it comes to India. So a lot of conversations. There was a working mechanism meeting that took place in Beijing, for which our Joint Secretary East Asia went for the first time. Shilpak was in Beijing for the meeting. Again, it all has to do with what the statement is going to look like. We're talking about consensus at the G20, Gaurav. At the India-China bilaterals, we've seen no consensus to actually come out with a joint statement in many a meeting, and we see separate statements come out. So we'll have to wait and see whether there's going to be a joint statement or separate statements from New Delhi and from Beijing.
As far as India is concerned, Geeta, this also is extremely critical. We heard Prime Minister Narendra Modi earlier today. The focus, while multilateralism, and the Prime Minister also referred to multilateralism being challenged and being under stress globally, Europe and United States may want to focus on the Russia-Ukraine war. The global south clearly wants the sustainable development goals, energy security, food security, these issues to be on the global high table and to be highlighted equally. Where do India and China stand there? Do we see India, China, Russia move forward on this axis?
Well, Gaurav, interesting question, because it is a very, the two countries are very interestingly poised. Now, when it comes to various issues to do with bilateral, we stand on polar opposite sides. But when it comes to multilateral issues, the fact that multilateralism is in a state of crisis is for everybody to see, because G20, the biggest multilateral bloc, is today a divided house. And in that divided house, China and India uniquely stand on the other side of the spectrum with Russia, and India enjoys a very, very rare and unique position where they have great ties with Russia as also with the West. So the only country and the only host nation where we see maybe full participation, Putin did not turn up in Bali for the G20 summit, but where we could see 100% participation is in India, is in New Delhi. But again, siding or taking a position on Russia and the Russia-Ukraine war does not mean India condones the war, like Prime Minister Modi said. This is not an era of war. But like the Russians say, Gaurav, then, that yes, it is not an era of war, but it's not an era of war for either side.